Okay. Hi, Ellen.
Oh, Lori, hi. So
Hi.
so good to see you.
It is really nice. It's kind of like chat, chat, chat. Okay, let's turn on the record button and make it official.
Yep, yep,
Nice to
that's
see
right.
you. I really appreciate you making the time. I know you're super busy and you've got a lot going on. I always assume that everyone knows you because I know you, and everyone that I've been teaching for years knows you. But for the people who don't, you're in for a big treat because we've got Ellen Bass here, and I'm going to read a little bit of your bio, the short version, just so we can anchor people in, like, who is this woman? Ellen Bass's newest collection, Indigo, was published by Copper Canyon Press in April 2020. Her other poetry books include Like a Beggar, The Human Line, and Mules of Love. And these are all amazing books. A lot of times people will email me after these conversations. They'll say, which one of Ellen's books should I choose? And I'm sorry to say, folks, all of them, all of them, all of them, all of them. There isn't a better book. They're really all incredible. Your poems appear frequently in the New Yorker, which I love that story, how for years they didn't take you. And then all of a sudden we start to see your poetry in the New Yorker, which was such a good thing for civilization. That's a whole
Oh,
other story if we got to it. I wasn't American Poetry Review and many other journals. Among her awards are fellowships from the NEA, the California Arts Council, 3 Pushcart Prizes, the Lambda Literary Award, the Pablo Neruda Prize, the Larry Levi's Prize, and the New Letters Prize. That's a lot of, you know, beautiful for you. I'm glad. Um, she co-edited the first major anthology of women's poetry, No More Masks, and your nonfiction book include, The Courage to Heal, a guide for women survivors of child sexual abuse, and Free Your Mind, the book for gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth. You are also a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets. You founded poetry workshops in Salinas Valley State Prison and the Santa Cruz, California jails. You teach in the MFA writing program at Pacific University. Is that still so?
yes, it still is so.
So is so. You are a teacher, teacher, teacher who also manages to write and publish. So thank you very
Oh,
much.
happy to be here.
Yeah, I was remembering the last time I saw you, believe it or not, was right before the pandemic. It was at the poetry reading in Berkeley with you, Marie Howe, Jane Hirschfield. Was there one more person?
And it was a benefit for the She Fund, Kim
Mm,
Rosen's She
right.
Fund, for helping girls who have escaped female genital mutilation, helping them then to go on to school.
It was
And
an amazing, it was a beautiful, beautiful night.
it was a wonderful experience to have right before you have to, isolate yourself.
Actually,
Uh,
completely.
So expansive, and everyone was so happy, and there was drumming, and we saw pictures of these
Yeah.
beautiful girls in Kenya
Yeah.
who are just coming into their own uh, power and joy.
It was
Um,
amazing. And right before the pandemic, like we had no idea.
February. Yes, we had no idea. It was a big crowd. It was toward the end of February. We had
Within weeks.
no
No
inkling.
inkling.
And right after that, we all, went home, of course. And it was probably less than a week after that that I was starting to make plans to go to AWP, Associated Writing Program, which is 10,000 people. And there started to be a buzz. Oh, and it was in Texas. And a friend of mine emailed me and said, you can't go. And I hadn't heard anything. I said,
Yeah.
of course I can go. Just wash my hands a lot. I mean, we had no idea. And she wrote back and she said, no, Ellen, you can't go. So that was like the first that I heard. And then many, many, many people didn't go, fortunately.
Yeah,
And
fortunately. Yeah.
then we were in it. Yeah.
That was the last time I saw you. And I should also just mention to people that I've interviewed you before, but even luckier, and I've gotten to, travel and go to New Mexico with you and be a student. You were the first poet who taught at this house. when I started inviting poets to
I
teach.
was the first.
You were the first poet, and I'm thinking it had to be 10 years ago,
Oh, I'm
I,
sure. And it
at
was
least.
wonderful.
And I remember because I was sitting at this table. This is so good. I was sitting at this table with my students, and we were reading one of your poems, and I thought to myself, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if Ellen was sitting here and we could talk to Ellen about her work? And I think 15 minutes later, I just got on the internet and I Googled you. I just found you out of nowhere. And I went, hey, my name's Lori Wagner, and I wonder if and you got back to me and you said, yeah, I'd love to come. This is what it looks like. This is what I do. And within a month or two or three, we had you here, and we were 25 people sitting around a living room. And I'll have to say, and then I'm going to move on into you. But that part of what was so incredible for me as a teacher was to get to sit and listen to the teachers who I really admired,
Mm.
because it helped me become a better teacher. And so my sort of gig was, it seemed like I was doing it for others, but I was definitely doing it for myself. And I invited you, and then we had a whole just crew of amazing poets over the last many, many years. And you came again, and just a huge generosity. So
Well, I just love how you open your house and your heart and just gather us all in. I remember the experience really well. And even to falling in love with your little silver birds on the wall. And
uh-huh.
then you helped me get some for myself.
Did I? Okay, I love that. These things we remember. I think that's
Mhm.
wonderful. Okay, so anyway, just wonderful, wonderful. And I'm going to ask you some questions.
Sure.
And I guess I wanted to start with, this thing we were talking about right before we started recording, which is that years and years ago, I asked you about your work, and what you said was you thought you wrote praise poetry. And what I remember about that and how I've shared it with people was that what I think I remember you said was, I write this poetry because I know we're going to die. I know we're going to die. And that there was another line I said, we're going to die. And that, so we have this moment in the poem where we have that awareness. And even as we're writing it, it's like life is slipping through us. It's in the moment. It's not like we're going to die in the future. Like, that's the feeling I got from it. And I wondered how you relate to that these days. Do you still, does your poetry still have that sense to it?
Yes, it's such a good question. In not my most recent book, but the one before that, I I have an epigraph from Rilke, and he says, "Oh, tell me, poet, what do you do? I praise, but those dark, deadly, devastating ways, how do you bear them, suffer them? I praise." And I think that insistence on praising in the midst of everything
Mm-hmm.
is a really driving force. I listened to a craft talk by the poet and writer Chris Abani, who I teach with at Pacific U in the MFA program. And so we just had our residency there, and I was listening to him, and he said, if you read all the work of a certain writer, you can figure out, what is their basic statement. What they're saying, the same thing
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
You mean each poet says the same thing in their work?
Yes, over and over and over again. I mean, not, you can find,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, or writers or novelists,
Right.
whatever. And so I thought, well, what is the thing I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I really, it seemed very clear to me kind of right away that I'm saying something along I mean, I don't have it articulated completely, but something along the lines of um, finding joy
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
affirming life
Mm-hmm.
in whatever the situation is, in the midst of your sorrow, in the midst of your loss, and in the midst of your
Mm-hmm.
limitations, in the
Mm-hmm.
midst of your regrets.
Mm-hmm.
How am I still going to affirm
Mhm.
life and joy.
Mhm.
And so I noticed that in my last book, Indigo, there's a lot of poems that deal with a time in my life when my wife was ill for some extended years.
Mhm.
And when I was putting the book together, I noticed that I was always pushing toward the healing.
Mhm.
Very few of them are just
Mm. Mm.
saying, this is so rough.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, most of them are saying, this is so rough, and
Mhm.
and here's where the light is, or here's where the hope is, or here's where the
Mhm.
healing begins, or here's this little bit of joy in the
Mhm.
midst of this really hard thing.
Mhm.
And that's because I need that
Yeah.
myself. It's all
Right.
purely, comes out of what do I need to say to myself.
Right.
And
Right.
there's a line by Lucille Clifton. She said, I choose joy because I am capable of it, and there are others who are not.
Uh-huh. Right.
And then there's a line from the poet Tony Hoagland where he says, I might be misquoting it slightly, but I shove joy like a knife into my heart. And I have said that to myself in many a situation over the last, well, since I first read that, which I can't remember exactly, but definitely more than a decade.
Mhm.
And that idea, I love that so much, the idea that you have to be aggressive, that
Mm.
you can't just be receptive to
Mhm.
joy,
Mhm.
that you have to insist. I'm
Mhm.
speaking I now, I'm saying you, but I mean
Mhm.
that I have to insist on it. I have
Mhm.
to grab it and insist on it, not just say, well, I'm open, come
Yeah.
if you want to. And that shoving it into my heart like a knife, because I think for me, there are situations that I've faced in my life where I have to work to feel that I deserve it,
Yeah.
that I deserve that joy, especially, when the sorrow or grief that I'm experiencing comes from my own bad judgment, my own,
Mm.
making mistakes of my own free will. And, not just when something is, kind of
Bad luck.
certain things just fall on you. You're walking down the street and a concrete block falls on
Yeah.
your head,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
But other things, I was a participant in creating that mess in my
Right.
life.
Right.
And, can I still then, do I
Mhm.
still have the right? And
Right.
so,
Right.
that's a lot of what my poems are doing is trying to insist upon
Yeah.
affirming life
Yeah.
and praising life and appreciating it, because even if you are young, you still have a limited number of years to live.
Mhm.
And no one knows when they're going to die. But when you get older, as I am, um, it's not far in the future. It's
Right.
really, I mean, I just feel it breathing down my neck now.
Yeah. I
And
have a question. This is amazing. Um, I really appreciate it. And I think that's why your work has been so instructive for me. I felt like your work has, instructed me how to live and how to sort of be a human being walking the planet. There's pure instruction in your work. It's not just beautiful, it is beautiful, but it's instructive. And here's my question for you, because you teach so many poets, and how do you find joy in a way that's not Pollyanna? That's just taking something sweet, because a lot of people do it, they just reach for that, let's just
Mhm.
lay some sweetness on top. And then, so that's my question, like, how can you get to something, even if you can't taste that sweetness yet, but you're yearning for it, you're longing for it? How do you bring it into a piece, even if it's not fully felt yet, but that in an authentic way?
Well, what you just said is really it. It's beautiful that you're yearning for it, you're longing for it. And that is it in itself. You don't have to say, I'm happy. You can
Mm-mm.
say, I'm longing to be happy.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean, so to
right,
speak, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, I always caution my students, do not resolve,
Yeah.
do not tie things up with a bow. Elizabeth Bishop said, beware the false upward rise.
Mm,
And it, it, another writer who I teach with, Pete Fromm at Pacific, who's a novelist, and he says, you get your characters into the swirling vortex of doom and you leave them there as long as possible. And so I tell my students that over and over again. No, we want to develop the muscle to be able to hang out
mhm,
in that swirling vortex
mhm,
and explore it, uh, describe it
mhm,
in detail, find metaphors for it,
mhm.
connect it to our experience, our lives, other aspects of our lives, and the the you know part of the praise is saying this too is a
Mm,
part of life,
mhm, mhm,
that we don't just get,
mhm.
we don't just pick out the candies of the candy box that we like
Mhm,
and, put the others back in,
mhm,
half eaten. I mean, we have, it's all it.
mhm.
We can't have a full life without
Yeah.
all of the life. So it's that way in which um, we have to, I mean, we don't like suffering.
Mhm,
We never like it and we never minimize it.
mhm.
You don't want to ever just say, oh, it wasn't so bad. You don't
No.
want to minimize it, but I want to be able to see it as having its own
Mhm,
um, integrity.
mhm. Wow. And then just the natural question then is, and this has been such a year of grief and loss.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so, it's not even the sort of a theoretical idea that we are going to die. We are dying.
Yeah.
We are, in a situation of just tremendous loss. Has that has that changed your work or made it even has it made you even more aggressive to
Yes.
find that joy? And what can you say about that just for
It
your own work?
has. It has. In my own writing, well, this year I've lost two people very, very close to me.
Mm,
And so
mm,
I've been writing about that a lot.
mhm,
And it's not, there's not what you would think of superficially as a lot of praise in there.
mhm,
But I think that just turning our attention,
mm,
really turning our attention to something
mm,
elevates it
mhm,
and gives it its own dignity, and we're working to make meaning out of the experience. So they are not, some of them are not happy poems,
mhm,
um,
mhm,
but they are poems that I think um, help me. That is the way that I work through and with my grief. And what I've learned over many, many years of writing and reading is that that's where we connect with each other as well. Whenever there's that authenticity, we connect with each other through it as well.
mhm,
And through the teaching, my teaching has been especially meaningful. I think that the world has felt so not only tragic but crazy,
mhm,
and poetry is a place of sanity. I mean, you can write about feeling crazy, or that doesn't mean the poems have to be um, well balanced in a certain kind of
mhm,
way
mhm,
that smooths things over, but we're making meaning, we're grappling with things in a way that's sincere and full of care. And even if what we're expressing is rage or anger or misery, we're still grappling with it in a way that is, the opposite of so much spin that we see all around in the world. Poetry is not about spin. It's about really trying to find out what the essence for me is. There's something that I want to know more about. There's something I want to explore, and I'm looking for a genuine discovery, and I'm looking to change myself. I'm looking to be transformed. And I can't say that every single poem I write truly transforms me, but some of them do. And each time it's a surprise and startling, stunning that a poem can really do that, but it can. You go in deeply enough, and when you're done, you are not the same. Something has changed, and that is what it's really about, because it is much too hard for any other payoff.
And we're going to talk about your teaching before we're done talking, but I mean, the way you're describing this is like, sounds like a craft process that is really worth. It's not only what we do on the page, but what we do in life. Like, you're taking the actual journey. And
That's right.
so it's on the page and in life. And it reminds me too, what you were saying about the questions. It reminded me of something I like about Mary Oliver poems are the questions she often puts at the end. And she asks this deep question. She doesn't just show us the beauty. Sometimes she does, but she'll often ask this beautiful question. And that's where the beauty can sort of arise, in that curiosity.
And
So
often there's a challenge in that question from Mary
right.
Oliver.
Yeah. I'm just, I have more questions than we have time for, but I wanted to ask you.
I'm talkative.
No, you're great. I'm just appreciating and enjoying this. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of all the people listening to this who are just really going to be gifted by this very thoughtful conversation about poetry. And I just want to say, because not everyone I work with does poetry, and I don't write poetry, but we use poetry in our work because it delivers for us this opportunity in the poem, in a very short way, to deliver us this opportunity of consideration. And I love the way I feel like they're like, when I'm sharing poetry with people, I'm just like lobbing these golden nuggets at them. And so I like the brevity of it. And so I'm just also, for people who are listening who aren't poets, you still can listen to this conversation with the same wide ears to whatever you're working on. Poetry is a form.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I talk to students, who are write in all different genres, I always say that, I'm always saying the poem and the poem, because that's what I do. But it's all so applicable. And anytime you're writing a story, anytime you're writing something from your own life, a nonfiction essay, a personal essay, a piece of flash nonfiction or flash fiction, it's all the same. You want to discover something that you didn't know before. You want to be different at the end of it.
I love it. I have a question for you, and then we're gonna just kind of transition, and I'd love you to talk about the work that you're doing with people, and you're gonna read us a poem. But, for a lot of my students, they're these beautiful human beings, and they want to be inspired, and they want to be moved to want to write, and they don't sometimes know what to write about. And I'm wondering if there's some examples of you just stumbling around the world, having a thought like, oh, maybe there's a poem, or how does that, and just how that comes to you, and maybe even just give us these moments so that people, I guess my hope is that people recognize that those moments are everywhere, and that we're always in the midst of something, and just curious how you tune for that.
Well, those moments really are everywhere. And I believe that if we were perfectly enlightened, any moment at all we could write about, because there is always so much going on in any moment
Mhm.
that could be a very rich poem. But uh, most of us, and certainly I, am not that enlightened. And so many times I don't, I can't be deeply enough in the moment that I'm in to see what poem might come out.
Mhm.
But it is totally true that you don't need a monumental experience to write a poem. And I've written poems about many things. I mean, I wrote a poem, one of the poems in Indigo is about a pork chop. And it was the best pork chop in the world that I cooked, fried for my wife and her mother, and you know, that was the impetus for the poem, was this pork chop. So and I wrote a poem recently. It's not out yet. It's going to come out in the New Yorker. It's called How to Apologize, and I wrote it because a few months back, my wife and I were in a situation where she had, you know, done something that I felt she needed to apologize for. And, you know, it wasn't a major transgression, but, you know, she needed to say, I'm sorry. And she couldn't spit it out. And I've learned that she is really my muse. Anytime there's a difficulty, the first thing that goes off in my head is, is there a way in which I can use this? And I just, I just wrote How to Apologize. I thought, okay, I'm going to write How to Apologize. And I'll just read you the first couple of lines of it
Yeah,
because
please.
it's so kooky what came to me, and I just love it. It's How to Apologize. Cook a large fish. Choose one with many bones. A skeleton you will need skill to expose. Maybe the flying silver carp that's invaded the Great Lakes, tumbling the others into oblivion. If you don't live near a lake, you'll have to travel. Walking is best and shows you mean it, but you could take a train and let yourself be soothed by the rocking on the rails. And I just, you know, that's the beginning of it. And I don't know why Cook a Large Fish came to me,
Yeah.
but that was just the gift part. You know, that was the
Yeah, right.
and the part that I take responsibility for is that I sat down with my notebook and a pen and wrote on the top of the page how to apologize.
Mm.
Because, you know, you're not going to get
Mhm.
any lines
Mhm.
unless you are there. At least that's what I believe. I believe that the muse,
Mhm.
I believe the muse is flying around. And if you're sitting there with your notebook and pen, or if you write on your laptop, that she's more likely to throw you a bone than if you're doing other things.
Mhm.
That she goes, oh, this woman has been trying to write a poem really hard for a while, you know, and she's written a bunch of bad poems. I write so many bad poems. She's written, you know, it's time to give her a good one.
Oh,
And so, you know, once I got that first line, I was off. But you see how a poem can just come from
yeah,
anything,
I love it.
anything at all. I I I have a poem, another poem in Indigo, where my wife called me and asked me to see if I could go out and get the eggs from the chicken because she'd left them and she was afraid that the dog would eat them.
Mhm.
And that became a poem.
Right. I love it.
Um,
I think probably if we read those poems of yours, we might learn something about recognizing the moment. They all,
they're all there.
right.
And you're just, I mean, it's like, I think it's Sharon Olds who talks about her poem and poetry antenna. You know, you want your antenna to be out there, just trying to catch it. You
Yeah.
know, you want to snag something, and it is there.
Mhm.
Oh, it's always there.
Mhm.
And you know, if you try,
Mhm.
some are going to work for you, and you know, maybe some days you'll just feel pretty flat, but other days it's
Mhm.
going to be there. And if you just start anywhere, Billy Collins often is looking out his window.
Right.
That's just where he is. He looks out his window. You know, I look out my window. I could say, oh, the party lights are hanging there in the rain.
Mhm.
Well, you
Well,
could start from there. I
right.
could start from there.
And then you have to just sit with it, and you sit with it and sit with it, and then you get up and you move and you go away and you come back, and some of these poems have legs and they move out into the world, and some stay in the notebook, and we just keep going.
But nothing is wasted.
Nothing is
Anything
wasted.
nothing is wasted on, I mean, I of course like a day when I write and I think, oh, I think that's a pretty good poem. Maybe it is, maybe it is.
Right.
But the days that it isn't,
Mhm.
they're not wasted because
Nope.
often I'm teaching myself something that I need for a future poem.
Mhm.
And when I get to that future poem,
Mhm.
sometimes I can look back and go, oh, you were learning that back then.
Mhm.
But you have to have the faith
Yeah.
that your practice
Right.
is preparing you for something. You don't know what it's preparing you for, but it is preparing you.
Mhm. Wow. That just reminds me of everything, even like the pandemic right now. We are actually in practice and we
That's
don't
right.
know entirely what for.
That's right.
And so there's a kind of praise or a kind of appreciation for things as they are. We have to appreciate them as they are because that's what's happening. And that's one of the things I've liked about the pandemic is that we haven't been able to spin it out, spin off this one,
That's
and
right.
we've had to spend a lot more time in difficulty and uncomfort and train ourselves that we actually have the capacity for more discomfort than we thought. And so
Yeah.
it's the same with writing, same thing. Um, okay, listen, I don't know about you, but like I wish I was free to become your student and spend, I want to be in these craft talks. I hope you do them for a long time so that I can be in them. Would you just talk a little bit about this beautiful offering, this craft talks that you're doing, just for a few minutes and give us the
I'd
feel
love
for it?
to.
And
I'd
then we're going to have you read us a poem and then we'll let you keep working.
I'd love to. I've been, when early in the pandemic, I started to think about this because one of the things that I love to do is to teach about the craft. And they're ostensibly about poetry, but many prose writers come to the craft talks because that very specific attention to language is so transferable. And even some of the more structural things are transferable as well. So I have a lot of poets who attend, but I also have a lot of prose writers who attend and have found it very helpful.
Mhm.
And I called them living room craft talks because I couldn't bear the idea of trying to do something that was like a TED talk. And that's not
Mhm.
um, anything disparaging about TED talks. I've watched and listened to and appreciated lots of them. But the idea that I have to kind of get it that slick, that polished,
Yeah,
and if I flub up or if I have to like get up and get something, that isn't like the kind of thing that you would include in a
right.
polished talk.
Yeah.
But so and also I like to talk when I know somebody is actually listening.
Mhm.
And these are recorded so people can listen to them
Mhm.
when they want. They don't have to listen to them live on
Mhm.
Friday mornings. They can listen Friday night or through the
They
week
can
or
be there live too,
whenever.
right?
But they can be there live
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But since it is live and I'm not fancying them up for the
Mhm.
recording,
Right.
then I feel really comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. I mean, the talks are not I don't go off on tangents and things, but
Right.
they're not formal. They're
Mhm.
conversational.
Love it.
And that because that's the way I like to teach.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I've the I did a series of 6, and then I did another series of 6 on revision, all on revision. And these are, my assistant is getting these ready for people to be able to now sign
Mhm.
up for them after the fact. And probably within the next month or two, they'll be ready.
Mhm.
And in the spring, in April, May, I'm going to do another new series on a new series of topics. And we'll be talking about the turn, the way a poem, and this applies to stories
All
too,
right. Yeah.
moves from what it's been talking about into the new discovered thing. We're
Mhm.
going to be talking about associative thinking, how we don't always have to move in a very logical and linear way, how juxtaposition and other elements of the craft how we leap from one thing to another and keep it interesting. We'll be talking about music, how the cadences of the lines or the sentences, this is for prose too, how we make flow, how we, impact the reader's experience through music. And we'll be talking about obsessions. When you are writing a series of things on something that really grabs you, and dialogue. We're going to be talking about dialogue, using dialogue in poems, which is going to be very transferable to prose. And what's the last thing we're going to be talking about? Now I can't remember it. Let's see here. Let's see, what is it? We're going to be talking about, I hate this word because it's such a fancy word, but there isn't a better one, ekphrasis, when poems are writing in response to art.
Like in Rattle, they do that a lot in Rattle.
Yeah. And so that's a really, really interesting, and it's going to be a week when we also look a lot at detail and description.
Okay.
So if anybody's interested, just go to my website. It's really easy to remember. ellenbass.com.
Yeah.
And it's the series is very accessible. If you are suffering financially from the pandemic or any other reason, just let us know and we'll arrange a full or a partial scholarship for you, whatever you need. That's one of the beauties of teaching in this way.
I love it.
Is that everyone is welcome.
Thank you so much for all of that. Anyone who gets a chance to study with you is lucky. I still remember many of the things that I've heard you say that I bring into my own work, and I really appreciate you. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
I'm going to ask you to read a poem, and I, will leave us with the poem, and then this is the awkward moment I figured out with these interviews, and then I will say, Ellen, thank you so much, and I will bid you adieu, and then I will turn off the recording, and you and I will have 1 second to just blow a kiss to one another.
That sounds perfect.
Okay. Good.
And I'll just say thanks to everybody for listening, and I hope that we get to study together because it will be a lot of fun.
I want to be there. All right.
You can be.
I can be.
Well, you can be, because it does. You don't have to do it at any particular time.
Yeah. I'm going to check it out. Thank you.
You can do it while you're in the bath.
I like that. Thank you. All right. What have you got for us?
I'm going to read the title poem of my new book, Indigo.
Beautiful.
Indigo. As I'm walking on West Cliff Drive, a man runs toward me, pushing one of those jogging strollers with shock absorbers so the baby can keep sleeping, which this baby is. I can just get a glimpse of its almost translucent eyelids. The father is young, a jungle of indigo and carnelian, tattooed from knuckle to jaw, leafy vines and blossoms, saints and symbols. Thick wooden plugs pierce his lobes, and his sunglasses testify to the radiance haloed around him. I'm so jealous, as I often am. It's a kind of obsession. I want him to have been my child's father. I want to have married a man who wanted to be in a body, who wanted to live in it so much that he marked it up like a book, underlining, highlighting, writing in the margins, I was here. Not like my dead ex-husband, who was always fighting against the flesh, who sat for hours on his zafu chanting Om, and then went out and broke his hand punching the car. I imagine when this galloping man gets home, he's going to want to have sex with his wife, who slept in late, and then he'll eat barbecued ribs and let the baby teethe on a bone while he drinks a dark beer. I can't stop wishing my daughter had had a father like that. I can't stop wishing I'd had that life. Oh, I know. It's a miracle to have a life, any life at all. It took 8 years for my parents to conceive me, First there was the war, and then just waiting. And my mother's bones so narrow, she had to be slit and I airlifted. That anyone is born, each precarious success from sperm and egg to zygote, embryo, infant is a wonder. And here I am alive, almost 70 years, and nothing has killed me. Not the car I totaled running a stop sign, or the spirochete that screwed into my blood. Not the tree that fell in the forest exactly where I was standing, my best friend shoving me backward so I fell on my ass as it crashed. I'm alive, and I gave birth to a child. So she didn't get a father who'd sling her onto his shoulder, and so much else she didn't get. I've cried most of my life over that. And now there's everything that we can't talk about. We love, but cannot take too much of each other. Yet she is the one who, when I asked her to kill me if I no longer had my mind, we were on our way into Ross, shopping for dresses. That's something she likes, and they all look adorable on her. She's the only one who didn't hesitate or refuse or waver or flinch. As we strode across the parking lot, she said, "Okay, but when's the cutoff? That's what I need to know."
Thank you for taking us on that journey. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lovely to be here with you, Lori, and with all of you. Thanks for listening.
Beautiful. All right. Ellen, thank you so much. Thank you so much.